The scent of pine needles and damp earth filled the cabin as I huddled closer to the dying embers in the fireplace. Outside, rain pattered against the tin roof in an irregular rhythm, matching the erratic beating of my heart. 3 days I had been here, in this forgotten hunter's cabin deep in the northern woods, far from the claiming ceremony that would have sealed my fate like so many others before me. The wooden walls creaked under the weight of the storm, and I pulled my grandmother's worn shawl tighter around my shoulders. "You are not meant to be claimed, Eleanor," she had whispered to me on her deathbed, her wrinkled fingers pressing the fabric into my hands. "This belonged to your great-grandmother. She too was different. She too had to run." The shawl's intricate embroidery depicted wolves running beneath a full moon, their silver thread catching what little firelight remained in the cabin. I traced the pattern with my fingertip, remembering how my grandmother's eyes had burned with unusual clarity in those final moments. Remember, sometimes hiding is not cowardice, but wisdom. The claiming ceremony happened once every decade in our territory. Any unmated female of age would be presented before the eligible males of the pack, and the strongest among them would choose. It was tradition, they said. It was natural, they insisted. But I had watched my childhood friend Mira return from her claiming 3 years earlier, her once vibrant spirit dimmed to a flicker, bruises blooming beneath her sleeves when she thought no one was looking. I had decided then that I would rather live alone in the wilderness than become property. My pale blonde hair fell around my face as I leaned forward to stir the coals, hoping to coax a little more warmth from them. The small pile of firewood I had gathered before the rain began would last another day at most. I was no survivor, no wilderness expert, just a terrified girl with a library job who had slipped away during the pre-ceremony festivities when everyone was too drunk on anticipation and moonshine to notice my absence. The howl came without warning, deep, authoritative, and close enough to make the windows rattle. I froze, poker in hand, as several answering calls echoed through the forest. They were searching. They were close. I extinguished what remained of the fire with trembling hands, plunging the cabin into darkness, and retreated to the corner where I had made my bed of old blankets found in a trunk. Perhaps if I remained perfectly still, perfectly silent, they would pass by without detecting me. For an hour, I sat motionless, listening to the sounds of the forest, trying to distinguish between the natural rustling of nocturnal creatures and the potential approach of search parties. Just as my tense muscles began to ache, demanding movement, the distinct crunch of footsteps on the gravel path leading to the cabin door made my blood run cold. They were not the hurried steps of a search party. This was the measured, confident stride of someone who knew exactly where they were going and what they would find when they arrived. My throat closed with panic as the footsteps stopped at the door. A moment of terrible silence followed, during which I could hear nothing but the thundering of my own pulse in my ears. Then came the knock. 3 deliberate strikes against the weathered wood that might as well have been hammer blows to my chest. "I know you're in there, little rabbit." The voice was deep, calm, and unmistakable. Dominic Blackthorne, the Alpha King himself. Not just any alpha, but the ruler of all 7 territories, whose presence at our local claiming ceremony had been the talk of the valley for months. "Your scent carries, even through the rain." I pressed myself harder against the wall, as if I could somehow melt into the rotting wood and disappear. How had he found me? Why would the Alpha King himself bother with one runaway female? "Open the door, Eleanor Gray," he continued, my full name on his lips sending shivers down my spine. "Or I will open it for you." My mind raced through impossible escape scenarios. The cabin had only one door. The windows were too small for me to squeeze through. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. With trembling legs, I stood, clutching my grandmother's shawl like a shield. Perhaps if I faced him with dignity, he would at least grant me a quick end rather than the humiliation of being dragged back to the ceremony like a disobedient child. I unbolted the door with unsteady hands and pulled it open just enough to see him. Even through the narrow opening, his presence seemed to fill the entire doorway. Tall and broad-shouldered, with rain-darkened hair and eyes that glowed amber in the darkness, Dominic Blackthorne was exactly as intimidating as the stories claimed. He wore no crown, needed no symbol of his status. The power radiating from him was palpable, a force that pressed against my skin like the charged air before lightning strikes. "May I come in?" he asked with unsettling politeness, as if we were meeting at a social gathering rather than in a derelict cabin in the middle of nowhere. I swallowed hard, finding my voice at last. "Do I have a choice?" A smile touched his lips, though it didn't reach his eyes. "We always have choices, Eleanor. Yours was to run. Mine is to find you." He pushed the door wider and stepped inside, bringing with him the scent of rain, forest, and something distinctly predatory that made my instincts scream. I backed away as he surveyed the cabin, taking in the meager belongings I had scattered about. My backpack, the half-empty water bottle, the book I'd been reading by firelight. 3 days in the wilderness, he mused. Impressive for a city-raised wolf who's never shifted. The casual mention of my greatest shame made heat rise to my cheeks. I was defective. Everyone knew it. 25 years old and unable to shift into wolf form, something that came naturally to most of our kind by adolescence. It was why I had always been overlooked. Why I worked sorting books instead of patrolling borders or hunting with the others. Until now, apparently. "I just want to be left alone," I said, hating how my voice quavered. "I don't want to be claimed. I don't want to belong to anyone." Dominic tilted his head slightly, studying me with unnerving intensity. "And yet here I am, claiming you anyway. Why?" The question burst from me, fueled by a sudden flare of anger that temporarily overwhelmed my fear. Why would the Alpha King concern himself with one defective female? There were dozens of suitable mates at that ceremony. Strong ones, complete ones. Something flickered in his gaze then. An emotion I couldn't decipher. He took a step closer, and I held my ground, though every instinct urged retreat. "Because you are the only one who ran," he said softly. "The only one who dared defy not just tradition, but me." Before I could process his words, a crash sounded outside, followed by raucous laughter. Dominic's expression hardened as he moved to the window, peering out into the darkness. "My guards," he explained, though I hadn't asked. "They've been tracking you since you disappeared. They're not as patient as I am." A new fear gripped me. One alpha I might be able to reason with, but a group of elite guards, likely frustrated from days of searching in the rain. I clutched my grandmother's shawl tighter. Dominic must have sensed my panic, for he turned back to me with an expression that almost resembled concern. "You have until dawn to make your decision, Eleanor Gray. Come with me willingly to the capital, or be dragged there by my guards." "That's not a choice," I whispered. "No," he agreed, his amber eyes gleaming in the darkness. "It's a chance. More than most would give you." He reached out suddenly, and I flinched, but his hand merely brushed a strand of pale blonde hair from my face, the touch feather-light and unexpected. "Dawn," he repeated, then turned and walked out the door, leaving me alone with the impossible decision and the haunting sensation of his fingers against my skin. I sank to the floor, my legs no longer able to support me. Outside, I could hear the guards setting up camp, their voices carrying on the night air. There would be no escape now. The shawl in my hand suddenly felt heavier, the silver-threaded wolves seeming to run with new urgency in the moonlight that now streamed through the window. My grandmother's final warning echoed in my mind. Sometimes hiding is not cowardice, but wisdom. But wisdom had failed me. I had been found. And come dawn, I would face a fate perhaps worse than the one I had fled, claimed not by a local alpha, but by the Alpha King himself, whose interest in me was as mysterious as it was terrifying. As I curled up in my corner, listening to the sounds of the guards outside and the continuing rain, I couldn't help but wonder if there was something my grandmother had failed to tell me, something about why I was different, why I couldn't shift, and why the most powerful wolf in 7 territories would come hunting for me himself. Dawn would bring answers one way or another. But as I drifted into an uneasy sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that Dominic Blackthorne had recognized something in me that even I didn't understand, something that made me not defective, but dangerous. Morning arrived with cruel swiftness. I had barely slept, drifting in and out of consciousness, each awakening bringing fresh waves of dread as I remembered my situation. The first pale rays of dawn filtered through the dirty windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like silent witnesses to my predicament. Outside, the camp had grown quiet. No more raucous laughter or crude jokes at my expense, just the occasional murmur of voices and the sounds of equipment being packed away. They were preparing to leave, with or without my cooperation. I gathered what little I had brought with me: a change of clothes, my worn copy of Jane Eyre, a small hunting knife that had proven useless for anything beyond opening canned beans, and stuffed them into my backpack. Whatever happened next, I wanted to face it on my feet, with what little dignity I could muster. My reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror was a stranger's, hollow-eyed, pale as moonlight, with tangled blonde hair falling past my shoulders. 3 days of hiding had left smudges of dirt on my face and a wild look in my eyes that reminded me of a cornered animal. I splashed cold water on my face and attempted to tame my hair, not out of vanity, but as a small act of defiance. I would not be dragged to the Capitol looking like a feral creature. 5 minutes, Rabbit, called a rough voice from outside, not Dominic's, but one of his guards. The casual use of the nickname the Alpha King had given me made my skin crawl. I wrapped my grandmother's shawl around my shoulders one final time, drawing comfort from its familiar weight. The silver wolves seemed to shimmer in the morning light, as if they might leap from the fabric and run free, something I would never do now. When I stepped outside, the scene that greeted me was more intimidating than I had imagined. 6 guards stood in formation, all tall, muscular men with the hardened expressions of warriors who had seen their share of violence, and at their center, somehow more commanding in daylight than he had been in the shadows of night, stood Dominic Blackthorne. The Alpha King wore simple traveling clothes: dark jeans, a black Henley that stretched across his broad shoulders, and a leather jacket. Yet he carried himself with an authority that made the fine suits of politicians and businessmen seem like children playing dress-up. His dark hair was still damp from morning ablutions, and those unsettling amber eyes locked onto mine the moment I appeared. "You chose wisely," he said, his deep voice carrying easily across the clearing. I gripped the strap of my backpack tighter. It wasn't a choice. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "And yet here you stand, ready to depart rather than making us drag you kicking and screaming." He gestured to one of his men, who approached with something in his hands. "Your transportation awaits." My heart sank as I realized what the guard held: restraints. Heavy silver cuffs connected by a chain, designed specifically to weaken werewolf strength. Not that I had any to speak of, but the symbolism was clear. I was a prisoner, not a guest. "Is that necessary?" I asked, unable to keep the tremor from my voice. Dominic studied me for a long moment before answering. "Do you plan to attempt escape again?" "Where would I go?" I spread my arms in a gesture of helplessness. "You found me in the middle of nowhere. You'd find me anywhere." Something flickered in his eyes, perhaps approval at my pragmatism, or amusement at my resignation. With a subtle motion of his hand, he dismissed the guard with the restraints. "She rides with me," he announced, and I noticed for the first time the vehicles parked at the edge of the clearing. 4 black SUVs with tinted windows, and 1 sleek motorcycle that could only belong to the Alpha King himself. The guards exchanged glances but said nothing as Dominic approached me, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his gaze. He was even more imposing up close, radiating heat and power that made my breath catch. "Have you ever ridden before?" he asked. I shook my head mutely. "Then hold tight," he said. And before I could process what was happening, he had taken my backpack, handed it to one of his men, and led me toward the motorcycle. Panic fluttered in my chest. I don't." "You can, and you will." Dominic cut me off, his tone brooking no argument as he handed me a helmet. "It's a 6-hour journey to the Capitol by car, 3 by motorcycle, the way I ride. I have matters to attend to that won't wait for your comfort." I swallowed my protests and put on the helmet with shaking hands. The weight of it felt strange, isolating me further from the world. Dominic swung his leg over the machine with practiced ease, then looked back at me expectantly. With as much grace as I could manage, which wasn't much, I climbed onto the seat behind him. The intimacy of the position was immediately, uncomfortably apparent. There was no way to sit without pressing against him, my thighs alongside his, my chest against his back. "Arms around my waist," he instructed, and I reluctantly complied, linking my hands over his taut abdomen. The engine roared to life beneath us, a mechanical growl that vibrated through my entire body. With a nod to his guards, who were already moving toward their vehicles, Dominic released the brake, and we shot forward into the forest. I had never experienced such speed, such vulnerability. Trees blurred past us as we followed trails too narrow for the SUVs, the motorcycle weaving between obstacles with a precision that spoke of Dominic's expertise, despite my fear. Of him, of the journey, of what awaited me at the capital. I couldn't deny the exhilaration that coursed through me as we raced through the wilderness. After an hour of intense riding, we emerged onto a paved road that wound through the mountains. Dominic opened the throttle further, and I instinctively tightened my grip around him, pressing my helmeted head against his back. Through the layers of his jacket, I could feel the steady rhythm of his heart, unnervingly calm in contrast to my own racing pulse. We stopped only once, at a remote gas station where Dominic refueled while I stretched my cramped limbs and used the bathroom. The elderly human attendant gave us curious looks, but asked no questions. To him, we probably appeared to be just another couple on a road trip, albeit an oddly mismatched one. "Are you hungry?" Dominic asked as I emerged from the bathroom, having splashed water on my face and attempted to tame my helmet-flattened hair. I nodded reluctantly, realizing I hadn't eaten since the previous afternoon. He bought sandwiches and bottles of water, handing mine over without ceremony. We ate in silence, leaning against the motorcycle, my eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of escape, but there was nothing but miles of wilderness in every direction, and the Alpha King watching my every move with those unnerving amber eyes. "Why are you doing this?" I finally asked, the question that had been burning in my mind since he appeared at the cabin door. "Why me, specifically?" Dominic finished his sandwich before answering, methodically wiping his hands on a napkin. "You read fairy tales as a child, Eleanor?" The non sequitur caught me off guard. "Of course." "Then you know that every king needs a queen." His tone was matter of fact, as if stating that water was wet or the sky was blue. I nearly choked on my water. "You can't be serious. I told you I'm defective. I can't shift. I have no status, no—" "I know exactly what you are," he interrupted, his gaze suddenly intense. "Better than you know yourself." A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the mountain air. "What does that mean?" Instead of answering, he took my empty wrapper and water bottle, disposing of them before handing me the helmet once more. "We should keep moving. The guards will have taken the main highway. We won't see them until the capital." The second half of the journey passed in a blur of winding roads and breathtaking scenery that I barely registered, my mind too consumed with Dominic's cryptic statement. "I know exactly what you are." What did he see when he looked at me? What did he know that I didn't? As promised, we arrived at the capital in just under 3 hours. I had expected a gradual transition, suburbs giving way to urban sprawl, but the werewolf capital was nothing like human cities. One moment we were in dense forest, and the next we were passing through an imposing stone gate set into what appeared to be a natural mountain formation. Inside was a hidden valley, bathed in afternoon sunlight that gleamed off glass and stone buildings integrated seamlessly with the landscape. Waterfalls cascaded down cliffs to feed a river that wound through the center of the city. Unlike the concrete jungles of human metropolises, this place breathed with life and natural beauty, but I had little time to admire it. Dominic drove directly to the center of the city, where a massive structure of stone and glass rose from an island in the middle of the river, connected to the mainland by 3 elegant bridges. The royal residence, I realized with a sinking feeling. Guards snapped to attention as we approached, bowing their heads in deference as Dominic guided the motorcycle through gates that opened automatically at our approach. We came to a stop in a courtyard where fountains played and carefully tended gardens bloomed despite the autumn chill. Dominic cut the engine and removed his helmet, running a hand through his dark hair. I remained frozen behind him, suddenly reluctant to complete this journey, as if not dismounting might somehow prevent what was coming next. "Welcome to your new home, Eleanor," Dominic said, turning to face me with an expression I couldn't read. "This isn't my home," I replied, finally finding the courage to remove my helmet. "It's my prison." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "That depends entirely on you." Before I could respond, the grand doors of the residence opened and a woman emerged, tall, Elegant, with silver-streaked dark hair and an expression of poorly concealed displeasure, she wore an impeccably tailored suit that spoke of authority and tradition. "You're late, Dominic," she called, as she descended the steps toward us. "The council has been waiting for hours, and you return with—" Her eyes narrowed as they fell on me, still perched awkwardly on the motorcycle. "What is this?" "This," Dominic said, his voice taking on a harder edge than I'd heard before, "is Eleanor Gray, my intended mate." The woman's face went through a remarkable series of expressions: shock, confusion, calculation, and finally a cold mask of civility. "I see. How unexpected." She turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I am Victoria Blackthorne, the King's advisor and aunt. Welcome to the capital, Miss Gray." I managed a nod, unable to form words as the reality of my situation crashed over me anew. Intended mate. The Alpha King had just announced his intention to make me his queen, in front of what was clearly a powerful member of his inner circle, who was equally clearly appalled by the choice. "Have rooms prepared in the East Wing," Dominic instructed Victoria, "and send Mara to attend to her." Victoria's smile grew even more strained. "The East Wing? Not the traditional quarters for the East Wing," Dominic repeated, his tone allowing no discussion, "and inform the council I'll join them within the hour." With a stiff nod, Victoria retreated into the building, but not before casting one final assessing glance at me, a look that made it clear I had just made a powerful enemy without saying a word. As the doors closed behind her, Dominic finally dismounted and offered me his hand. I hesitated only briefly before taking it, allowing him to help me off the motorcycle on legs gone numb from the long ride. "Your aunt doesn't approve," I said, stating the obvious as I tried to regain feeling in my lower extremities. Dominic's expression was unreadable as he looked toward the now closed doors. "Few will approve at first. That doesn't matter." "It matters to me," I said, surprising myself with my boldness. "I didn't ask for this. Any of this." His amber eyes returned to me, and for a moment, I thought I glimpsed something like sympathy in their depths. "None of us ask for our fate, Eleanor. We can only choose how we face it." With those cryptic words hanging between us, he guided me toward the entrance of what was to be my gilded cage, leaving me to wonder what fate had in store for a defective wolf who had caught the eye of a king. The east wing of the royal residence was nothing like I had imagined. Rather than a dungeon-like prison, I found myself in a suite of rooms that rivaled luxury hotel accommodations. A spacious bedroom with a 4-poster bed draped in midnight blue silk, a sitting room with comfortable furniture arranged before a fireplace, and a bathroom with a tub deep enough to swim in. But the most striking feature was the wall of windows overlooking the valley, offering a panoramic view of the capital that stole my breath. In the late afternoon light, the city gleamed like a jewel nestled in the mountain's embrace. "Is it to your liking?" The question came from a petite woman who had introduced herself as Mara when she'd shown me to the rooms. With her kind eyes and no-nonsense manner, she reminded me of the librarians I had worked with back home. "It's beautiful," I admitted, pressing my palm against the cool glass, but still a cage. Mara moved to stand beside me, her reflection in the window showing neither pity nor judgment. "The Alpha King could have placed you in the traditional chambers for royal brides," she said, folding her hands before her. "Windowless rooms in the heart of the residence, where you would be guarded day and night until the mating ceremony." I turned to look at her, unsure if this was meant as consolation or warning. Why didn't he? A small smile curved her lips. "That, Miss Eleanor, is a question only His Majesty can answer." Mara helped me settle in, showing me the closet already filled with clothing in my size, a detail that unsettled me deeply, and explaining the residence's routines. "Dinner would be brought to my rooms tonight," she informed me, as the king had council matters to attend to. Tomorrow, however, I would be expected to join him for breakfast. After she left, I stood in the center of the opulent space, feeling more lost than I had in the ramshackle cabin in the woods. At least there, my path had been clear. Hide, survive, remain free. Here, everything was uncertain except the fact of my captivity. I showered, letting hot water wash away the dust of travel and the lingering scent of pine that reminded me of my brief taste of freedom. Wrapped in a soft robe I found hanging in the bathroom, I returned to the bedroom to find a dinner tray waiting. roast venison, root vegetables, and fresh bread that made my stomach growl despite my anxiety. As I ate by the window, watching the city lights begin to twinkle in the gathering dusk, I contemplated my situation with forced clarity. I was the intended mate of the Alpha King, a position countless females would kill for, yet one I would flee from if given half a chance. I was a defective wolf who couldn't shift, yet somehow valuable enough for Dominic to retrieve personally. I was, in every sense, out of my depth. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. I tightened the robe around myself before calling, "Come in." To my surprise, it was not Mara, but Victoria Blackthorne who entered, her silver-streaked hair now pulled back in a severe bun that emphasized her sharp features. She carried a small wooden box, which she set on the coffee table before taking a seat and gesturing for me to join her. Reluctantly, I perched on the edge of the sofa across from her, acutely aware of my state of undress compared to her immaculate suit. "I thought we should have a private conversation, Miss Gray," she began, her tone coolly professional, woman to woman, without my nephew's interference. "About what?" Victoria's smile was thin as a paper cut. "About your future, of course, and the opportunity you've been presented with." She opened the box, revealing a velvet interior that held a delicate silver necklace. This is traditionally given to the Alpha Queen on the eve of her mating ceremony. It dates back 12 generations. The necklace gleamed in the lamplight. A silver crescent moon pendant inlaid with tiny diamonds that caught and reflected the light like miniature stars. "It's beautiful," I said cautiously, sensing a trap in this seemingly cordial visit. "It's also never been worn by a wolf who couldn't shift." Victoria closed the box with a decisive snap. "Let's be frank, Miss Gray. You and I both know you're an impossible choice for queen. Whatever my nephew's fascination with you, it cannot override centuries of tradition and the political realities of his position." My cheeks burned with the familiar shame her words evoked, but something in me, perhaps the same stubbornness that had driven me to flee the claiming ceremony, refused to cower before her. "If I'm such an impossible choice, why did he bring me here?" Victoria leaned forward, lowering her voice as if sharing a confidence. "Dominic has always had a weakness for strays and lost causes, but make no mistake, the council will never approve a defective queen. They will force him to choose a proper mate, someone of pure bloodline and proven strength." Her gaze sharpened. "Unless you remove yourself from the equation." "You want me to leave?" I asked, incredulous. "Your nephew tracked me through miles of wilderness. Do you really think he'd just let me walk away?" Her smile grew calculating. "Not leave. Exactly. Just withdraw your claim. Tell him you have no interest in being queen. That you recognize your limitations. He would have no choice but to release you from consideration." "I never made a claim in the first place," I pointed out, anger beginning to simmer beneath my confusion. "He claimed me." Victoria waved a dismissive hand. "Semantics. The point is, this can end one of two ways. Either you gracefully withdraw, preserving your dignity, and perhaps securing a comfortable position somewhere in the kingdom away from court, or you stubbornly persist until the council forces a humiliating rejection that leaves you with nothing." The threat was clear, yet something about her urgency made me wonder. If I was truly such an impossible choice, why was she here trying to manipulate me into withdrawing? Why not simply wait for the inevitable council rejection she seemed so certain of? Before I could formulate a response, the door opened again, this time without a knock. Dominic stood in the doorway, still dressed in the formal attire he must have worn to the council meeting, his face a mask of controlled fury as he took in the scene before him. "Aunt," he said, the single word carrying a wealth of warning. "I don't recall summoning you to this wing." Victoria rose smoothly, the wooden box disappearing into her suit pocket. "I was merely welcoming our guest and ensuring she had everything she needed." How thoughtful. Dominic's voice could have frozen flame. "I'm sure Eleanor appreciates your concern, but it's late, and she's had a long journey." The dismissal was unmistakable. Victoria inclined her head in a gesture that managed to be both respectful and defiant, before gliding past Dominic with a final meaningful glance at me. The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow conveyed finality. For a long moment, Dominic remained where he stood, his jaw working as if he was physically restraining words. Finally, he moved to the window, his back to me as he gazed out at the night-cloaked valley. "What did she say to you?" he asked, his voice deceptively calm. I pulled my robe tighter, suddenly conscious of my vulnerability. She made it clear that I'm an impossible choice for queen, and suggested I withdraw before the council humiliates me with a formal rejection. A low growl rumbled in his chest, so primal and wolf-like that I instinctively shrank back. He turned at the movement, his amber eyes glowing with an inner light that reminded me sharply of what he was: an apex predator, the most dominant wolf in 7 territories. "And what did you tell her?" he asked, his voice rough with restrained emotion. "Nothing." You interrupted before I could respond. I gathered my courage to ask the question that had been haunting me since the cabin. "Why did you choose me, Dominic? The truth this time, not fairy tale nonsense about kings and queens." He crossed the room in 3 long strides, coming to kneel before me so that our eyes were level. This close, I could see flecks of gold in the amber of his irises, could feel the heat radiating from his powerful body. "You truly don't know what you are, do you?" he asked softly, searching my face as if the answer might be written there. I shook my head, unnerved by his intensity. "I'm defective, a wolf who can't shift. No." He took my hands in his touch surprisingly gentle for someone with such strength. "You're not defective, Eleanor. You're rare. So rare that many believed your kind extinct." "My kind? What are you talking about?" Dominic's thumbs traced circles on my palms, sending unwelcome shivers up my arms. In the old stories, before werewolves organized into packs and territories, there were wolves who served a special purpose. They couldn't shift because their power manifested differently. They were called harmonizers. Wolves who could soothe the savage instincts of alphas, who could heal rifts between packs, who could sense lies and intentions like others sense sense. I stared at him, disbelief warring with a strange resonance in my core, as if some part of me recognized the truth in his words. "That's just a myth. A fairy tale. Is it?" He released one of my hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small silver object that he placed in my palm. This belonged to the last known harmonizer, who served as queen to my great-grandfather. "Look familiar?" My breath caught. It was a brooch in the shape of a wolf, nearly identical to the embroidered wolves on my grandmother's shawl. The same silver thread, the same distinctive pose with head thrown back in a silent howl. "This can't be real," I whispered, though the proof lay cold and heavy in my hand. "The bloodline was thought lost during the territorial wars," Dominic continued, "until I caught your scent at the claiming ceremony. A harmonizer's scent is distinctive to those who know what to look for, sweet, but with an undercurrent like petrichor, rain on dry earth." My mind reeled. If what he was saying was true, it explained so much. Why my grandmother had warned me to run. Why she had given me the shawl with its significant embroidery. Why I had always felt like an outsider among my own kind. "If I am what you say," I said carefully, "why tell no one? Why let your aunt and council believe you've chosen a defective mate?" A shadow crossed his face. "Politics. There are those who would see a harmonizer as a threat to the current power structure. Others who would seek to control or exploit you. Until you're officially under my protection as mate, it's safer if your true nature remains between us." I withdrew my hand from his, needing distance to think. "And what if I don't want to be your mate? What if I don't want this role you've decided for me?" Dominic rose to his feet, his expression unreadable once more. "Then once you're trained to understand and control your abilities, you'd be free to go. But I don't think that's what you want, Eleanor." "You don't know what I want," I countered, standing as well so I didn't have to look up at him. "Don't I?" He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming my senses. "You want belonging, purpose, to be valued for who you are, rather than rejected for what you're not. I'm offering you all of that." His words struck too close to the secret yearnings of my heart, and I turned away to hide the emotion that threatened to show on my face. "I'm tired. It's been a long day." I heard him sigh softly behind me. "Rest then. Tomorrow, your training begins." He moved toward the door but paused with his hand on the knob. "And Eleanor, don't let Victoria's words trouble you. She fears what she doesn't understand, a common weakness in wolves who believe strength is measured only by fang and claw. With that, he was gone, leaving me alone with a silver brooch in my palm and a head full of impossible revelations. Sleep eluded me that night, my thoughts churning with Dominic's revelations. Harmonizer. The word echoed in my mind like a half-remembered melody. I examined the silver brooch in the moonlight streaming through my windows, tracing its delicate contours and wondering about the woman who had worn it generations ago. Had she been kidnapped and forced into her role as well, or had she embraced her destiny willingly? Dawn was breaking over the mountains when Mara arrived with a tray of tea and a carefully selected outfit for my first day of training, whatever that entailed. The clothes were simple but finely made, soft gray leggings, a pale blue tunic, and supple leather boots. "The king awaits you in the gardens," Mara informed me as she poured tea into a delicate porcelain cup. Her tone was casual, but I noticed the curious glances she cast my way when she thought I wasn't looking. "Does everyone know?" I asked, accepting the tea. "About what I supposedly am?" Mara's hand stilled momentarily. "Rumors spread quickly in the residence, Miss Eleanor, but few know the truth of what a harmonizer is, beyond old stories told to pups." I sipped the tea, finding its subtle herbal flavor calming. "And what do those stories say?" A small smile curved her lips. "That harmonizers were blessed by the moon goddess to temper the fire of alpha blood. That their presence brings peace to troubled minds and hearts. That they see truth where others see only what they wish to see." She straightened the already immaculate bed covers. "Of course, stories grow in the telling." After breakfast, I followed Mara through the residence's labyrinthine corridors, taking mental note of each turn, each landmark, filing away information that might prove useful should escape become possible. The residence was coming alive around us, staff members nodding respectfully as we passed, their curious gazes following me until we turned the next corner. The gardens were more extensive than I had realized from my windows, stretching from the formal arrangements near the building to wilder growth that blended seamlessly with the surrounding forest. Dominic waited for us on a stone terrace overlooking a reflecting pool, his tall figure silhouetted against the morning sun. "Thank you, Mara," he said without turning. "That will be all for now." The attendant bowed slightly before leaving, shooting me an encouraging smile as she retreated toward the residence. "Did you sleep well?" Dominic asked, finally turning to face me. In the clear morning light, he looked less intimidating than he had the previous evening, still powerful, still undeniably alpha, but somehow more human. "Hardly at all," I answered honestly, seeing no point in pretending. He nodded as if he'd expected this. "It's a lot to process. That's why we'll start small today." He gestured to a stone bench beside the pool. "Sit with me." Warily, I complied, making sure to leave ample space between us on the bench. The reflecting pool before us was still as glass, mirroring the blue sky and drifting clouds above. "What do you know about pack bonds?" Dominic asked, his gaze on the water rather than me. I frowned, recalling lessons from childhood. They're the emotional connections between pack members, stronger between alphas and their direct subordinates, strongest between mates. "And what do they feel like to you?" The question caught me off guard. I had never given it much thought. "I don't know. I've never been particularly sensitive to them. Another defect, I suppose." Dominic shook his head. "Not a defect. Harmonizers experience pack bonds differently. Instead of feeling them as connections, you have the ability to see them, manipulate them, even sever them if necessary." He turned to face me. "That's what we're going to work on today. Learning to see what's always been there." Skepticism must have shown on my face, for he continued. "Close your eyes. Focus on your breathing, just as you would if you were trying to shift." "I've never shifted," I reminded him, but closed my eyes nonetheless. Curious, despite my reservations, the principle is the same. Quiet your mind. Feel the sun on your skin, the stone beneath you. Now, instead of looking inward as wolves do when shifting, extend your awareness outward. Imagine you can see the air between us, the space itself. I tried to follow his instructions, feeling slightly ridiculous as I sat with eyes closed, attempting to see the invisible. Just as I was about to give up and tell him this was pointless, something shifted in my perception. Not dramatically, not the blinding revelation I might have expected, but a subtle change, like when eyes adjust to darkness, revealing shapes that were always present but previously indistinguishable. Between Dominic and me stretched a faint thread of golden light, tenuous but unmistakably real. My gasp caused the vision to flicker and fade, my eyes flying open in surprise. "You saw something," Dominic said. It wasn't a question, a thread of light, connecting us. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. "That was a pack bond?" He nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. "The beginning of one. Not yet a true bond. That would require acceptance on both sides. But the potential for it. And everyone has these connections? Between all pack members?" "Yes, though they vary in strength and quality. The bonds between alphas and their packs are particularly strong, networks of light that can span territories." I closed my eyes again, seeking to recapture the vision. This time, the transition came more easily. The thread between Dominic and me remained thin but visible, but now I noticed more, a complex web extending from him in all directions, some strands thicker than others, some pulsing with bright energy, others dimmer but still intact. "I can see them," I whispered, afraid that speaking too loudly might break the spell. "Your bonds to others, they reach out like a spider's web." "Look beyond me," Dominic instructed, his voice low and steady, to the residents. "What do you see?" I expanded my awareness as he suggested, and nearly recoiled at the sudden influx of information. The residence was alive with bonds, hundreds, perhaps thousands of interconnected threads forming patterns so complex they defied comprehension. "It's overwhelming," I admitted, letting my eyes open and the vision fade. "How does anyone make sense of it all?" With practice and training, Dominic's expression was the closest to openly pleased I had seen from him. "What you've just done, seeing bonds without physical contact, is something even the most skilled harmonizers typically require years to master." Pride bloomed unexpectedly in my chest, quickly followed by suspicion. "Why are you teaching me this? If these abilities make me valuable, why give me tools that might help me escape you?" Something like hurt flickered in his amber eyes. "Is that all you think this is? Me keeping you as a possession? Isn't it? You tracked me down, brought me here against my will, announced I would be your mate without even asking me." Dominic rose from the bench, pacing a few steps before turning back to me, frustration evident in the set of his shoulders. "I did what was necessary to protect you. Do you have any idea what would happen to a harmonizer discovered without the protection of a powerful alpha? You would be claimed as a prize, used for your abilities, treated as a tool rather than a person. As opposed to being treated as a prospective queen who isn't allowed to say no?" I countered, rising as well. "How is that different?" "Because I see you, Eleanor." The intensity in his voice stopped my retort cold. "Not just what you can do, or what you are. I see your courage in running, your resilience in that cabin, your determination to maintain dignity even in captivity. I'm not asking you to be my mate because you're a harmonizer. I'm asking because of who you are." The sincerity in his expression was disarming, but I wasn't ready to surrender my anger just yet. "You still didn't ask. You announced it as a fact." A rueful smile touched his lips. "Alpha habits die hard, but you're right." To my astonishment, he knelt before me on the stone terrace, taking my hand in his. "Eleanor Gray, I am asking you now, will you consider becoming my mate, not because of duty or ability, but because together we might build something neither of us could achieve alone?" The unexpected gesture left me speechless. Dominic Blackthorne, Alpha King of 7 territories, was on his knees before me, the defective wolf, the runaway, the unwilling captive. The contradiction was so absurd I almost laughed, but the earnest look in his eyes stopped me. "I need time," I managed finally, withdrawing my hand from his. He nodded and rose, once again the composed ruler. "Fair enough. But time is a luxury we may not have in abundance." His gaze shifted to something over my shoulder, his expression hardening. "It seems we have company." I turned to see Victoria approaching, accompanied by a tall, powerfully built man with silver at his temples and cold eyes that assessed me with naked disdain. "Dominic," Victoria called, her voice sweet with artificial warmth. The council chairman has requested an audience. I thought I might find you here with your guest. The man beside her inclined his head slightly. Your Majesty, we have matters of importance to discuss before this afternoon's territorial summit. Dominic's face revealed nothing, but I felt a sudden tension in the air between them. Chairman Mercer, I wasn't aware we had scheduled a meeting this morning. Some concerns have arisen that cannot wait, the chairman replied, his gaze sliding to me with barely disguised contempt. Concerns about recent decisions. I see. Dominic placed a hand at the small of my back, the touch both protective and possessive. Eleanor, this is Chairman Mercer of the Royal Council. Chairman, this is Eleanor Gray. I inclined my head, mimicking the formal greeting I had observed. Chairman. Mercer's acknowledgement was the barest nod. Miss Gray, I trust you're finding the capital educational. The double meaning was clear, but before I could respond, Dominic spoke. Eleanor has been gracious enough to postpone her judgment of our hospitality, given the unusual circumstances of her arrival. Perhaps the council might extend the same courtesy. The rebuke was subtle but unmistakable. Chairman Mercer's jaw tightened, but he offered a thin smile. Of course, we are nothing if not courteous. He turned his attention back to Dominic. However, the matter remains urgent. If you could spare a moment? Dominic's hand lingered at my back, warm and reassuring. Mara will escort you back to your rooms, he told me. We'll continue our discussion this afternoon. As if summoned by his words, Mara appeared at the garden entrance. With a final warning glance at Victoria and Mercer, Dominic strode away with the chairman, their heads already bent in intense conversation. Victoria remained behind, watching me with calculating eyes. Enjoying your lessons, Miss Gray? Learning to be a proper queen. Learning many things, I replied carefully, unwilling to reveal what Dominic had been teaching me. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I'm sure. Just remember what I said last night. The council has preserved the purity and strength of the royal line for centuries. They will not allow it to be diluted. With that parting shot, she followed her nephew and the chairman, leaving me with the distinct feeling that I had just witnessed the opening move in a dangerous game, one whose rules I didn't fully understand, but in which I was clearly the prize. The week that followed settled into an unexpected rhythm. Mornings were spent with Dominic in the gardens, practicing my newfound abilities to see and understand the complex web of pack bonds that surrounded us. Afternoons found me in the Royal Library, a vast chamber filled with ancient texts that documented werewolf history, studying the sparse references to harmonizers under the watchful eye of an elderly scholar named Thaddeus. Your kind were never numerous, he explained on my third day, carefully turning the brittle pages of a manuscript at least 3 centuries old. But they were highly valued, particularly during times of conflict. A skilled harmonizer could sense deception, soothe tensions between rival alphas, even temporarily suppress a wolf's ability to shift if the situation demanded it. Is that why we were hunted? I asked, thinking of my grandmother's warnings. Thaddeus's rheumy eyes met mine with surprising sharpness. Who told you that? I hesitated, suddenly cautious. It seems a logical assumption. If we had these abilities, we would pose a threat to those in power. The old scholar closed the book with gentle hands. History is written by the victors, Miss Gray. What the official records call the territorial wars, others might call something else entirely. It was the closest anyone had come to confirming my suspicions that there was more to my heritage and the disappearance of harmonizers than I was being told. Evenings were my own, spent exploring the residential wing where my rooms were located or watching the sunset from my windows as I contemplated the strange turn my life had taken. Dominic was often absent, caught up in the territorial summit that had brought alphas from all 7 regions to the capital. On the rare occasions he joined me for dinner, our conversation remained carefully focused on my training, never venturing into more personal territory. Until the 7th night, when he arrived at my door later than usual, the weight of the summit evident in the shadows beneath his eyes. Walk with me? He asked, his typical commanding tone softened to something almost tentative. Curiosity piqued, I agreed, following him through corridors I hadn't yet explored until we emerged onto a rooftop garden I hadn't known existed. Unlike the formal gardens below, This space was wild and natural, with native plants growing among stone pathways and small reflecting pools that mirrored the star-filled sky above. "My mother created this place," Dominic said, as we followed a winding path to a small clearing with a stone bench. "She said everyone, even kings, needed somewhere they could simply be themselves." The personal revelation surprised me. In all our time together, Dominic had shared nothing of his family beyond the obvious connection to Victoria. "Your mother sounds wise," I said, taking a seat on the bench and looking up at the constellations wheeling overhead. "Is she still alive?" Pain flashed across his features, quickly masked. "No, she died when I was 16. An attack by rogues from beyond the territories." "I'm sorry." The words felt inadequate, but they were sincere. Whatever my feelings about my current situation, I wouldn't wish such loss on anyone. Dominic sat beside me, closer than he had in the gardens during our training sessions. "Tomorrow is the final day of the summit," he said after a moment of silence. "The Alliance vote." I had heard whispers of this from Mara and the library attendants, a controversial proposal to formalize relations with the human government, allowing limited but official recognition of werewolf territories while maintaining our secrecy from the general population. "You support it," I guessed, reading the tension in his posture. "I proposed it," he corrected. "The world is changing, Eleanor. Technology makes it harder each year to remain completely hidden. Better to control the terms of our emergence than be discovered unprepared." "But the council opposes you." This too I had gathered from overheard conversations and meaningful glances among the staff. Dominic's laugh held little humor. "The council fears change above all else. They would have us cling to isolation until humans stumble upon us with cameras and weapons, forcing a confrontation we cannot win." He ran a hand through his dark hair, a rare gesture of frustration. "I need a unified front tomorrow, all 7 alphas in agreement." Understanding dawned. "And that's why you need me. A harmonizer could help secure that unity." "Yes." At least he had the grace not to deny it. "Your abilities could be instrumental in helping the alphas see past their immediate concerns to the larger picture." I stood, anger flaring suddenly. So that's what this has really been about. Not protection, not some fairy tale about seeing the real me. "You need a tool for your political agenda." Dominic rose as well, his height allowing him to look down at me despite my indignation. "It's not that simple." "Isn't it?" I turned away, staring out at the nighttime view of the Capitol. "You didn't even know I existed until the claiming ceremony. Then suddenly, I'm your destined mate, worthy of a king's attention. How convenient that I also happen to possess abilities you desperately need at this precise moment in history." Strong hands gripped my shoulders, turning me to face him. "You think I orchestrated all this? That I somehow arranged for a harmonizer to appear just when I needed one?" His amber eyes blazed with intensity. "Do you know how rare your kind is? The last confirmed harmonizer died over 80 years ago. When I caught your scent at that ceremony, it was like finding a ghost. Something I'd heard of but never expected to encounter." His nearness was distracting, the heat of his body radiating through the thin material of my evening dress. "Then why didn't you approach me openly? Why let me run?" "Politics," he admitted, his grip on my shoulders gentling but not releasing. "If the council knew what you were before I had secured your position, they would have moved against you. And yes, I need your help tomorrow. But that doesn't mean my other reasons for wanting you were false." I searched his face, looking for deception, wishing I could use my fledgling abilities to read the bonds between us and determine their true nature. "I'm not ready for what you're asking. I've barely begun to understand these abilities, let alone control them." "You're stronger than you realize," Dominic said, one hand moving to cup my cheek. "I've watched you progress in days what takes most years to master." The touch of his palm against my skin sent an unexpected warmth through me. Despite everything, the lack of choice, the political machinations, the uncertain future, I couldn't deny the connection that had been growing between us. Whether it was the natural bond between Alpha and Harmonizer, or something more personal, I couldn't say. "And if I help you," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "what then? What happens to me after you've secured your alliance? Dominic's thumb traced a gentle line along my jawline, his expression more open than I had ever seen it. Then I would still want you as my mate. My queen. Not for your abilities, but for this, his other hand pressed lightly over my heart. Your courage, your questioning mind, your refusal to be cowed even by an alpha king. The sincerity in his voice was compelling, but doubt still lingered. And if I said no? If I helped with your alliance but declined to be your mate? Pain flickered in his eyes, but he nodded slowly. Then I would honor that choice, though it would grieve me deeply. You would have a place here. Protection. Freedom to develop your abilities, but no obligation to me beyond what you freely give. It was the first time he had explicitly offered me a choice, a future that I could shape rather than one thrust upon me. The acknowledgement of my agency, belated though it was, loosened something tight within my chest. I'll help tomorrow, I said finally. Not because you need it, but because if what you say about the changing world is true, then isolation truly is dangerous for all our kind. I took a step back, needing space to think clearly. As for the rest, I still need time. Relief and hope warred in his expression. Thank you. The summit convenes at midday. Mara will help you prepare. I nodded, turning to leave, but his voice stopped me before I reached the garden exit. Eleanor. When I looked back, he stood where I had left him, starlight silvering his dark hair. Whatever you decide about us, know that meeting you has changed me. Perhaps that's the true power of a harmonizer, not manipulation of bonds, but transformation of hearts. His words followed me back to my rooms, echoing in my mind as I prepared for bed. For the first time since Dominic had appeared at the cabin door, I allowed myself to consider a future here. Not as a captive, but as a queen who might help shape a new era for our kind. The next morning dawned bright and clear, as if the weather itself approved of momentous decisions. Mara arrived with not my usual training clothes, but a formal gown of deepest blue, its simple lines emphasized by silver embroidery that echoed the pattern on my grandmother's shawl. His Majesty had this commissioned the day you arrived, she explained as she helped me into it. Though I understand alterations were made after your conversations. I examined my reflection in the mirror, noting how the initial design had clearly been modified to incorporate elements of my personal style, modest but not conservative, elegant but allowing freedom of movement. It was a gown that suggested royalty without demanding it, that honored tradition while acknowledging individuality. As Mara arranged my pale blonde hair in a simple but elegant knot at the nape of my neck, I fingered the silver brooch Dominic had given me, the symbol of the harmonizer queen who had come before me. After a moment's consideration, I pinned it at my shoulder, a quiet acknowledgement of the heritage I was only beginning to understand. You look every inch a queen, Mara said with satisfaction, stepping back to admire her work. I'm not a queen yet, I reminded her. Perhaps not ever. Her knowing smile suggested she had her own opinions on that matter. The territorial alphas have assembled in the Great Hall. The king awaits you in the antechamber. Dominic was pacing when I arrived, his powerful frame dressed in formal attire that emphasized his status. Dark trousers and jacket over a white shirt, with a silver chain of office across his chest. He stilled when I entered, his eyes widening slightly as they took me in. You're wearing the brooch, he said, his voice rougher than usual. I touched it self-consciously. It seemed appropriate, a reminder of what I am and what I might become. He crossed to me, taking my hands in his. Are you ready? Once we enter that hall, there's no turning back. The alphas will know what you are, and the council. His expression hardened. They suspect already. Victoria has seen to that, but they cannot move against you openly, not with the territorial alphas present. I took a deep breath, centering myself as he had taught me during our training sessions. What exactly do you need me to do? Observe the bonds between the alphas and their advisors. Look for tension, deception, fear. Help me understand where the true resistance lies, so I can address it directly. His thumb brushed over my knuckles. Your presence alone will have an effect. Harmonizers naturally ease tensions among wolves. It's part of why alphas find them so compelling. Is that all I am to you? I couldn't help asking. A natural sedative for aggressive wolves? The question had been meant as a joke to lighten the tension, But Dominic's response was serious, his amber eyes holding mine with unexpected vulnerability. "You are the missing piece I didn't know I needed, Eleanor, the strength I never thought to find." Before I could respond, a gong sounded from the great hall. Dominic straightened. Once again the Alpha King, though his hand lingered on mine. "It's time." As we approached the massive double doors that led to the great hall, I squared my shoulders and raised my chin. Whatever happened next, I would face it not as a captive or a tool, but as what I truly was, a harmonizer with the power to change the course of our people's future. And perhaps, in the process, to claim the future I wanted for myself.